Ready, aim, release! Anyone see my mammoth? Hello! We are back. It is it's another Monday. It's another Monday. It is just gone 7 o'clock. Yeah. Carlo, how are you doing today?
Good, yeah. I'm just waiting for all the new intro when memes in the chat.
I know, right? I know. Someone might have guessed, but I was actually away somewhere this weekend, which is my only real time to work on stuff like that. So yeah, unfortunately, guys, it's not this week. Hopefully get
Next
done.
week, though, yeah.
That's
Next week.
the plan is next. The honest
Always
plan
next
is
week.
next week. Yeah. You know, mind you, I say that I've got a massive assignment due in on Monday, so we'll see how that comes out. But yes, hello to everybody. I'm feeling a tad under the weather. I have to admit, my voice, you can probably tell, is going a little bit. I was a lot more tired today than I thought, and then I had the most possible boring day you could possibly imagine. And Carlo's still in his pajamas, so.
I'm always in my pajamas, guys. I'm not gonna lie. Like,
even when he's out of the vent.
I get up early afternoon, do a couple of hours work, and then switch on Tourney Grounds. And getting dressed never gets a look in.
Fair. Carlo, new camera, says Belisarius. No, this is just what he looks like clean.
Yeah. New lighting. This is natural light from the window for once. Oh wow, look at that. Actual shadows as opposed to being lit by the room.
Look at that. It's actually bright outside.
Yeah, it is late May, so the UK actually has some sunshine at 7 o'clock in the afternoon.
Yeah, it's nice actually. Yes. Anyway, I'll go through the normal news segment for this week. There we go. That was the news segment for this week. I'm glad you all enjoyed it.
We didn't even put news for once. It says tournaments. Wow, look at that.
Yeah. Yeah, like there was no news really. Actually, that's kind of a little bit of a lie. And I say a little bit of a lie because I believe it was last week. Technically, last week during Tourney Grounds, we talked about the post that Song of Ice and Fire Tabletop Miniatures game official page put out regarding the EU Championships and everything that went on. There was a small amount of news since then. Last week, they actually promoted the Italian national event directly on the CMON webpage, which is fantastic. And a little bit of a thing here, they posted up the artwork for the Italian National Championship, which straight up has the Song of Ice and Fire Stats logo on it. So there you go. In case you're wondering which one I mean this one right here is on the official page. So there's a nice little thing, but that's about as far as news goes, really. Nothing else major happened in the Song of Ice and Fire world. Except randomly last night, Phil sent us a message. Like, this is after the tournament. More on that in a second. Like, there's loads of like stock coming in somewhere. I have no idea where he's even getting this stuff anymore. But there are stockists getting things like Bear Riders, I think was the big one, and Drowned Men. Right? Those are the two big ones, I think.
I mean, that's a restock. It's not.
Yeah, it's a restock, but like a restock means they're still available, right? That's the important bit.
Yeah.
So yeah, check out the various retailers that you might check out. I'm going to assume the one we're talking about here is Russia, but not Russia.
Tonight, Ilya. Tonight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. All right then. So should we dive in to the event you ran, Carlo.
Absolutely.
Yeah. How did you find it went from a TO perspective?
I think it went well. There was only one person in the entire tournament who I hadn't met before. So I knew that the level of game understanding was going to be pretty high. Though there were so few rules questions that there didn't need to be a TO from that perspective in general. Really, there was just like some people who wanted to clarify a rule. They weren't even necessarily even like at a difference with each other. Nobody really needed a TO, which was useful because I decided to play. Which I normally tell people that they shouldn't do as a TO, but basically our last 21st person joined very late, made us odd at the very last minute that I had very much set in my mind that I was playing, and basically had told people that I was playing. So some people were like expecting to play against me in the tournament and stuff like that. So I felt like I wasn't gonna drop out and make us even again because of how late it was. But yeah, some people in Patreon are asking about the buys. Yeah, I mean, I took some liberties with the like official buy structure because I effectively chose the buys on the first day to be myself, Daryl, and Scott, so that I could get the tournament set up in the first round and that they could keep an eye on the stream in the next 2 games. I felt that we could do that because of the 6 rounds that we had, whereas technically as a 21-player tournament, we only need 4.5 rounds to get ourselves a single undefeated player. And so you really actually give yourself loads of room to like do strict bracket, non-strict Swiss pairing. It's actually the point at which Swiss pairing becomes really powerful when you run more rounds than you need, because it really starts to just force all the top players to play against each other, and all people in like their various brackets to play against each other, and you start to get a stronger and stronger and stronger finishing position. People are less less determined their finishing position by the route that they took, like kind of like who they were randomly paired against and how they ended up in like the 5th round, because you always have second chances, always have a chance to come back. And we'll come on to talk about the results, but there was a very interesting finish, which was 3 players went 5-1 and nobody went undefeated in the whole event, which I think is actually a really good result. Some people might prefer a really clean-cut single undefeated winner, but I think that it was a very, very fair reflection of the kind of event and the players that were there. And from a personal perspective, I got to play more matchups that I wanted to play later on into the event, so I was very happy with that part.
I know, without going too much into the results, I know I would have loved an undefeated player, and also loved not having to have my last matchup, because I have to admit, not putting shade on the matchup at all, you don't realize how tired you are. I did have a quick look back at the footage of the like some of the games and stuff played, and you can see towards the end of day 1 and towards the end of day 2, you can actually start to see fatigue kick in for players, and you don't notice it when you play, but it's kind of obvious when you watch someone play, and you can see that like they're like, oh shit, I meant to do this, and like these are players that haven't been missing things potentially all day, or on other streams. And again, like it's not something you really notice at the time, I think, but it is definitely something that you can see in players. And I know that myself and Tom today, Hilo, have actually just talked about the fact that we are way more knackered than perhaps we thought we might be, which is a good thing. It's good. It means we've been putting energy and resources into playing the game, but it takes a lot more out of you than you realise. Yes. Not to say I'm not making an excuse, but let me tell you, it's not an excuse. No, not at all. Right. So the final standings anyone who's been on stats knows that Hilo won. Carlo with the other 5-1, or should we say 4-1 record?
Yeah, 4-1 and a bye. Yeah. I mean, I do think that it really was for the best that Hilo won for a lot of reasons. Firstly, because he beat me. Secondly, because Mickey and Hilo both had real 5-1 records, whereas I actually had 4-1 and a bye. So I think it really genuinely would have been not great if I had won the event by a single secondary point, based on the fact that I had chosen to give myself a 3 and 4 secondary point win in the first round. But I think it was a very deserved winner, and I think that incredibly close final finishing position of 16 TPs and then either 18, 18 or 17 is just like a really good reflection of what the event was.
Definitely. Yeah, no, it was good. It was. I mean, for those of you who didn't know, myself, Tom, and Carlo, at the end of the tournament, had all played one another. The top three players had all played one another, and every single one of us had come away with a victory over one of them and a loss to the other. It was a three-way kind of like draw, if you will, in the matchups, and every single one of them was a narrow. So, I got the narrow win over Tom. We both agree, this is not just me saying this, we both agree a very horrible slogged 2-round game that just took a long time to play out. Then Carlo, you got the narrow loss to him over a 3-round game. I think the game before on the Saturday last game, was it? I think.
Yeah, it might be 3. Yeah. Could have been 4.
Right.
Maybe 3.
And then me and you played a 4-round game, which conveniently I thought was only 3 rounds at one point. And that was again another narrow. So yeah, no, it was good. It was a good result across the board. So that is good. That is good. You didn't play Chris, did you? You didn't get to play Elite.
No, I dodged him in the tournament, which I was pleased about for a couple of reasons. One, because I'd played him on Friday night. He came up to the club beforehand. So I'd already managed to play him, and I played him on TTS recently quite a few times. So of all the top players that were there, he was the one matchup that I didn't particularly want to see. And I also didn't want to see him because I wasn't super happy with my Night's Watch matchup. I had some more ideas going ahead that I could improve on. But yeah, I was playing this Euron list, and effectively I was really, really all in on needing my opponent to fail so Discord. And in the current meta, that just doesn't happen. Like everybody's posting a 5-up morale, so like it's just not going to happen. It's not reliable enough. It's not a thing that you can bank a win on. And that's really what happened against Hilo. It was a very close game, but I had to play for So Discord, and when that didn't come off, he really just like went to town on my weak units.
I have to admit, the So Discord ability, obviously a very strong ability as an effect. Arguably in the current meta, where switching things off for an entire round comes at a premium. To have it on an order, long range, on your commander for effectively free. Okay, you could sit here and argue that you pay for that in his cards not being as good as they could be. But it is very strange in my head that the ability works on destroyed ranks of the enemy rather than on current ranks in Euron's unit, which is very similar to all of those style of rank abilities.
Yeah, well, current ranks in Euron's unit would be a way more powerful ability. You could assert pressure from long range. You could just walk forward and say, "Well, take a -3 test for me." Whereas the problem with So Discord is that actually what the real problem, particularly into the Ranger Hunter matchup, is that realistically they're never going to end in combat with you, right? So you're never going to have you're never going to be able to put that intimidating presence, which he also brings, onto that So Discord.
Yeah.
Also, if they're running Amon or they're running conscripts, it's very unlikely that they'll ever have significant destroyed ranks any given time. So they're effectively taking a flat test. The only way that you can choose to not do that, so Discord is powerful because it's start of any turn, not just start of a friendly turn. I think that does bring its level up. But the problem is that I find, particularly into the Ranger Hunter matchup, is you're driven to make your first action a charge on your own turn to charge into Ranger Hunters, do some kills, enable the and get some pillage off of the back of that to give you extra minuses.
Mm-hmm.
Then you also have your intimidating presence, and then at the start of the next round, you're just like, well, I'm all in on this, so you need you to fail this, so Discord. Otherwise, you're just going to attack and retreat, and then use Relentless, and then use, like all these things. So you're forced into committing to make this move, and it's an all-in move as well, because chances are, if you're playing this matchup in the way that I have been, it's a 3 NCU versus 3 NCU game, and you're only going to get to play this move the round where you would normally want to take the board as your first action. You'd want to pick up swords and do some damage or something like that. So you're all in on this thing, and I built that list around that concept. In reality, it was nowhere near as reliable as I wanted it to be. Not because the maths was any different, just like the getting it to work against a good opponent just doesn't happen the way you hope that it might. What about running it without Asher? Well, personally, there isn't another point in my mind in that list at all. You could take Victorian instead of one of the units, but I hate that because that unit will 100% die. Like, it'll get annihilated by Ranger Hunters.
Melisandre, it loses to the Baratheon matchup, right? It just loses to so many things that can punish that one unit. And it's also 6 combat drops, right?
I mean, yeah. So if we're beginning with this initial concept that I am playing a 9 activation list, right? Like, start with that. The one point that I'd be willing to sacrifice silenced men, not being silenced men, before I'd sacrifice any other points, because what I want is 6 units on the board, and I want 6 real units with 12 wounds each. The thing about Asher, she is incredibly powerful. She is an amazing value for 1 point, but if you don't have that 1 point to sacrifice, then it's very, very difficult. And to me, more importantly, half of Asher's value comes from Warcry, half of it comes from having a 5-up morale. Having 5-up morale isn't that useful if all it does is protect 1 of 5 units that all have terrible morale. My opponent's just going to focus down the other ones. Like, it doesn't help me that much to have 1 of my trappers be able to be more resilient than the other ones, because good opponents don't allow you to use defensive abilities if there are units that don't have them. So yeah, it's a very extreme list, right? Like, so in general, I would say if you can afford Asher, if you have a point, buy Asher, right? Like 100%. But the reality is that for the concept that I was trying to put together, it didn't work in this list.
Mm-hmm.
The only other point is you take Wendemir over you taking overtaking Baron. You free up a point for Asher, and that is that is discussion of a trade. But Baron's use is at least as good as Asher's, except it's like Asher on a stick. You can put Asher whichever unit you think is about to get focused down. Asher can be on any one of those 5 units. Not exactly Asher, right?
It's different. It's different because the whole point with the Ranger lists is they don't actually care about the morale. It's a discussion we had the other week about like veterans and things like this. It's the amount of dice they put out. They put out so many dice that they kill you with hits, which is a discussion point in itself. You know, that hit-based damage right now against a lot of things is actually the solution. Rather than necessarily having panic damage. But if you're going to go panic damage, have it big, have it be impressive. Don't just have these piddly, the Lannister type things. Oh, there's an extra 1 damage you might take from this panic check a couple of times. No, don't care. Not enough. Make it big. Make it scary. The thing with Asher is that it protects you against the morale. Sure, it doesn't protect you against the hits. And Baron, I mean, without Baron, doesn't the Silence Men unit cease to have any ability to go in? Because it just gets murdered.
Yeah, not then when we can't play Euron anymore, we basically have to play Baelor, because without Baelor's hardened and to the last, that unit is just gonna die before, like, it's just gonna get gonna get Ranger Hunted straight in the face. It's gonna get whatever happened to it. Weren't the trappers just melting? No. Like if you're playing into other 9 activation lists, then like they probably don't have things just to melt units, right? Like the only thing in the whole game, I think, right now that fields 9 activations and melts units is this specific John Ranger Hunter list, right? And it does it by having incredibly few wounds on the board. So the concept is that it tries to, and it has a ton of its important kind of power and burst damage all rolled up into a really high concentration of important keywords, right? So the concept is, if So Discord can turn them off, then it's you've turned a 10-point relentless, boldness and courage, 2 activation, can maneuver and shoot, can attack and retreat, can do everything, right? Except it has relatively okay basic stats, right? Weak armor save, 5+, 5+.
Mm-hmm.
Only a mediocre 7.54 or something like that on its attack profile, short range. If we can switch that off, that becomes a very big investment for 10 points.
Mm-hmm.
That's the concept. Everybody else, if they're fielding 9 activations, if they're fielding anything above 8, then they're fielding equally crap units. And I believe over the course of the game, Ironborn Bowmen, even with their 8-up morale, are the best point-for-point 4-point unit, right? So, and trappers are up there too, right? Like they have to get a bit more stuck in, so their morale is more of an issue. But between their disrupt and their order, overall, I'm like, basically, if I can turn this into crap units fighting crap units, I have one of the best crap units in the game. And all I need to do in that specific matchup is turn it off. But I wouldn't bank on it again. I would change the way I would change the way I think about it, and I wouldn't put my eggs into the Euron basket, and I would run different commander with a different objective. So overall,
was one of the things that people perhaps don't get put enough of respect into, maybe with the Bowmen and the Trappers actually, at 4 points apiece, is there's the lack of degradation on their attack through till final rank, right? It's only in the vast majority of cases, you're starting on 6, you typically go 6-5-4, but Trappers and Bowmen going 6-6-4. That 1 dice isn't much. Over the course of a game, it's probably literally like 2 or 3 extra dice, but it does give you that little bit extra threat where it's like, this is still basically a full health unit, even though I've taken 7 wounds. And that is actually very important against lists that are going to try and attrition you, because they're not quite attritioning you in the way that they want. I do think that the Bowmen are good. But yeah,
it's worth noting though, by the way, that that list, in my mind, it was actually built to fight Free Folk.
Yeah.
And it played into 2 very good Free Folk players, 2 very strong Mance lists. And it managed to come away with the most minor victories ever, both times. So, it wasn't like an overwhelming success. It wasn't like, hey, I built this list specifically to counter Mance and it absolutely smashed Mance. It was like, I built this list to counter Mance and we've scraped through by the skin of our teeth. I probably overplayed it. The other list, the other list got played once. And was more if I'm like really scared of like a panic list, even though it's not necessarily much better against panic lists. It's just if my opponent brings something more elite, if my opponent brings like 7 activations or even 6 activations, then this one bringing 8 activations with a lot more power pieces involved. It's got Victorian Reavers. It's got Flayed Men. It can really put out some hurt, this list, and still does it while out activating anybody who's playing at the 7 bracket. I think that into a more general meta, into a more general player, that is a much better list. But into the specifics of what I actually think is the top tier of tournament right now, which unsurprisingly, I do think it's way closer than it was in the past. It's not just flat out play more activations, be better, play more aggressive, be better. I still think that all the best lists in the game, which I'm scared of, are 9 activations still, right? Like, they are still what I consider the things to beat in a tournament. And so being able to field one myself and building a list that's specifically designed around those 9 activations and fighting a 9 activation list is very important.
This is actually a point that I was talking to Phil, Lateralus online. I was talking to Phil about this last night after the event. And Phil did relatively well. I think 3 for 3 in the end by the end of it, and he was posting near the top. He played against myself and Hilo at least. I think he may have played against other players as well near the top. So yeah, Chris as well. He played into Elite Teddy with a close loss at the end there. But basically, it was exactly that discussion with his Baratheon lists. He ran the 6 activation, a triple cav list with the double champions, a flayed man, and some wardens and some attachments here and there. He ran a more classic Stannis Baratheon One True King, kind of like 7 activation bomb type. And it was one of the things. I mean, Baratheon can't play high activations, right? They literally can't play over 8. But it was one of the things I discussed with him, and basically said to him the problem that exists in Baratheons to some extent right now is that they can't reach those 8 and 9s to compete with those other lists. So they have to rely on the other stats and stuff. And unfortunately, that will work against players who don't know the solutions to those types of units. But if you know the solutions to those types of units and you build them into your list, you tech them in as little additions, because usually you don't need much to tech them in, you will beat those lists as a better player nearly 100% of the time. And it is actually a stark contrast that you can beat the midfield with these lists that are these kind of like archetypal Baratheon style stuff at the moment, and they will dominate the midfield. But the moment you start looking at top end, we've got the Mel Jacken, which Carlo's kind of said it before. I call it this now, is like just casino. It's just like, yeah, everyone builds 5 morale lists. Take a load of 7 morale tests, and if you fail them, I win, and if you pass them, I lose. So there's that side of it. But then there's like the cavalry lists, which people really struggle into. They are punishable. They're really, really punishable when top players play against them, because they know what they want to do and how they're going to do it well ahead of time. So it's an interesting one. And it is. I think it is very interesting that we see typically high activations at the top, and then it's the middle, like low activation band, almost in the middle, of those players where they're dominating the midfield section, but not necessarily pulling out the wins against those high activation lists because they can't. So yeah, it's an interesting one. Tom, for example, Tom Ilo, I don't actually know if he used his second list. It's almost impossible to tell. I'd have to go back and look at footage and streams and things like this. I don't know if he used his second list, which has
I
got
definitely saw him field. It's
Swarm
exactly the
Bros.
same, but one unit of Swarm Brothers, right?
Yeah, he replaces Hunters with Swarm Bros.
Which I still hate. You know, like.
Yeah. You know why it's
You know
there
what
for,
can I
right?
say? What can I say? He won the tournament, but you know, what I mean, I still believe that you can do more with your lists than just have the same list, but with like, you know, the same list under two things, right? Like, but
The thing is that Swarm
it
Brother,
works.
the 9 activation Swarm Brother Watch Captain allows you to absolutely chomp through high armor stuff.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. You just go in. You're gonna get last activation. You're gonna be out of charge potentially with John. You know, if they're running a double NCU list as well, only 2 NCUs. There's the real potential that the horses is still open. And you can for the watch charge into relentless hit, into activation hit, into opening the next round, take the swords into relentless, and you know all of these cards coming out, and every single one of these is sundering. Potentially, some of them are going to have vulnerable and rerolls when already in melee. Like it all adds up, right? It all adds up, and even 2 morale units. Well, the moment you make the 3 morale, Carlo, 3 armor, you see what happens to 3 armor units if you just put enough dice into them. They fail enough saves, and they just melt. But yeah, that is a thing. Yeah.
Mikel says that John Love is sus. I don't know. Like I think he's. I openly say I believe him to be underrated. You know what I mean? Like as in, you know, like forget the stats. Like I think he's a good commander, right? And
he's popular.
you know,
He's very, very popular. People will play him because of the character and things like that, and so a lot of people will play him across the spectrum, and they'll play him in basically any list. That doesn't mean it's a good or bad thing, but that is something you have to factor in. It's the same reason that the Mountain Commander probably does worse than he probably is, because he's super popular and lots of people play him.
yeah, he really is bad.
Well, I think he's bad as well, but I actually think he's probably better than his ranking suggests, and he's still bad.
John was really, really hurt by the change to Jaw, right?
Yeah,
not being able to just first turn say here's for the watch. The times that I've played John, and he is practically my Night's Watch commander of choice. The times that I've played John, I did not draw for the watch like at all, but I was playing John Hunters, right? I went whole games playing Bow and Marsh, taking letters aggressively because you know like Night's Watch deck's amazing. So like why wouldn't you just try and have as much of it in your hand as possible at all times? Did not get it, and John felt lackluster, right? But you could say the same of almost any commander if you don't draw any of the command cards. But the thing is I don't rate his other 2 cards that highly. For the watch is the only one that I really care about. And the reason and what like really drives that list to be super top tier. And so I can see why you can think that he's amazing and you can look at it and be like, why the hell wouldn't I play John here? And then when you actually play it, you're like, oh, this is why I don't play John, because he's not reliable. He's not winning as consistently as something else could win. So, and that's a lot of what the ranking measures, right? Like a lot of what people's difference between their perception of what a commander is and what its actual ranking is the reliability of something versus its upper potential.
Yeah.
One of the reasons why Assassinate is never as highly rated as people think it should be in almost all forms. You know, like wherever it appears, people are like, why isn't Expert Duelist like this amazing, like top rated thing? Because it only works 2/3 of the time. But you remember all the times that it worked and all the times that it completely destroyed you.
Yeah.
People turn a blind eye to all the times where that 3+ just like didn't work for them. or didn't work for their opponent, and they assign that to like people are always assigning like luck to their skill when it is in their favor, and then when it's not, it's luck. It's not skill anymore. So yeah, I think that's. I think it'd be really, really interesting, actually. I think the 3+ concept in the game, that can be counter strategy at a 3+, that can be counter plot at a 3+, that can be expert duelist at a 3+. I really wonder what people's psychology around those those effects would be if you made it a 4+. If you told people it was 50-50, I think people would think way differently about it than if you told them it's a 3+. Because a 3+, people are like, well, it'll work most of the time. And most of the time in people's minds is all of the time.
Yeah. It is.
You get people who are like, so if you make a morale test on an 8+, people are like, well, I'll definitely fail. You make a morale plus on a 7+, they're like, oh, I'll definitely pass. And they're like pissed off when they fail. It's like, it's practically a 50-50, guys. You know, like it's 42-58.
Yeah.
But it's as close as you're going to get to a 50-50 on a 2d6 kind of chart, right? So yeah. I think that's really interesting.
Failing a 7+.
The 3+, people are convinced is almost 100%.
Yeah, failing a 7+ is, you know, you kind of go, yeah, I'm expecting that. I'm expecting to fail a 7+ almost. Failing a 6+, it's like, it happens. You move on with it. Failing a 5+ naturally without any effects is pretty savage, but it does happen. And a 66% is actually closer to a 6+ than it is a 5+ morale. In terms of odds, right? So yeah. Paul's saying
66% is the majority. Yeah, obviously it's the majority, but people act like 66% is 99%.
Yeah.
They are so upset when they fail it, and they'll give you all this, and you're like, you're the one who played an ability that only works 2/3 of the time, mate.
Dan says, just like counterplot, you never remember the times it fails. I remember the times it fails. Oh, see, that's the irony, right? And I don't know if this is you. I really remember the times where things fail for my opponent on 3+s, because I know that because my expectation is that it won't fail. I go into it expecting I'm not going to pass this. I'm not going to get the 1/3 chance. So I've got to plan around losing that 1/3, and then the 1/3 comes up, and I'm like, let's go. You know, whereas I think people go, I'm gonna pass the 2/3, and don't have a problem, and then it's like, oh shit, I failed it. What do I do now? So yeah, it's you've got to bank on losing it, and I know you can't bank on losing it, or just believe in the dice gods like Carlo does and never fail it. But no, you've got to bank on losing it and say, right, what happens if this fails? What's my out? So, it is pretty savage though, rolling the 1 in 9 on counterplot with the reroll. That is a bit savage. Yeah.
But yeah, I learned a lot. It was actually, the Euron spam list was very theoretical. I had to even borrow a unit to play it, and like normally I have a million copies of everything, like it really was spam. Improvements I would make, I would definitely use one drowned men solo
over
the second unit of trappers.
Interesting. Yeah.
I might swap Baelish for Windermere. Is really hard, right? So again, specifically, it's built to fight free folk, so Botley is non-negotiable. Botley stopping Endless Horde on either turn 1 or turn 2 is super, super important. Baelish is very clutch, and he has a great combination with Botley, because you can say nobody's allowed to claim this zone, and then you can go and claim it yourself anyway with Baelish by swapping onto that zone. So you can, for example, gives it more generic use. One of Botley's general powerful use is your opponent makes a big charge at the end of the round. They're going to try and tempo play you. They're going to open with the swords, and you just say, swords is off the table for the round, guys. And then, because nobody's actually claimed it, Baelish then just says, but I'll have swords, thank you. Your opponent's activated their first NCU. I think that's very, very powerful. Also, in the 3 NCU versus 3 NCU meta, which I still think is going as strong as ever, he has the very powerful effect of it's the round where you would lose one of your NCUs. You make it so that you both lose one of your NCUs. It even has some subtle effects on like forcing the activation order to be slightly different, but that's getting really deep into like setting up the timing and tempo of the round. So anyway, Botley, non-negotiable. Into the very specific list, I don't believe that he's the best NCU, but into the meta right now, I think that he's incredibly important. If you're playing into a very high free folk meta, then yeah, I think that don't leave home without one list with Botley in, and that list better be the list that you're ready to fight free folk with.
Yeah, I mean, even against the Night's Watch, John, stopping for the watch, you know.
Yeah, exactly. Other than that, like I say, I would swap one Trappers into Drowned Men. I think that their healing can really help, especially if you don't have Wendermere. Baelish's other clutch effect is that you don't have to control swords the round that you're playing and having What Is Dead May Never Die down on the board, right?
Yeah.
Your one-time effect per game is always saved for, I've just played What Is Dead May Never Die, and I don't have swords. And then you just say, but I do have swords for this round, and that can allow you to continue going, and it can really bank in on like your opponent thinking that you might not have it because you haven't taken swords, or that really helps, I think. So there's his dual effect and why I really like him in combination with Botley. But if we assume that the list really, really needs Baron because he is an amazing combination with Silenced Men, shoring up their one single weakness, then it's so hard to fit in another NCU. But I think I might take Wendermere. After all of those things said, Wendermere can perform some of Baelish's roles by taking a zone just proactively at the start to block and just swapping it into a token instead. You don't get that swords effect, but you could always just heal before you take an action if you really needed to keep something alive with What Is Dead.
I have to admit, the Wendermere Baelish as well. If you're going first, you can Wendermere Horse to prevent the Endless, and you're not getting nothing out of it. You can use the horse if you want. You can, take a token and just be like, right, that's cool. If you're talking about a counter Night's Watch free folk, I'm less concerned about Baron being in the list against the free folk. There are some things like the traps and stuff that it plays into. But I feel that free folk are only going to target.
You can't play assertively into free folk without Baron because you will end up getting double or triple trapped. You can't walk forward
Yeah, but you're not. Right. My point being is that you're only ever going to march in probably from outside range. You might come in once. You're probably only taking one lot of traps, and you're probably late on into the round, I'd have thought. And my kind of issue with the Baron edition is that free folk are one of the factions out there that can target your morale and remove Baron. I think that was my concern. I do think Night's Watch, Baron has a huge thing into Night's Watch, but I think in the free folk mirror, I'm not that bothered about Baron because I know that if I'm gonna spending attacks, I'm gonna have to spend panic tokens and panic effects to remove that before I can really kill him. So I either choose to do it or I just choose to ignore it because I ain't doing it. So I think that is the big thing. But that's only my.
Yeah, I also played recently against Darla for the first time, and I played into traps on Darla, and really felt that that there was so much remote damage from the way that Free Folk can play right now.
I do think that Dala's more of a meme though, because in my head that Dala's going to come down on bags if you're engaged with the unit at the start of the round. And if Dala's going on bags, they're not taking horses. And if it's Dala down on, if you're going first, you've got the option to take bags. I think is open, especially with the Baelish. But obviously you lose Baelish. But you can keep Baelish and take Wendy over Baron maybe. But yeah. I do think it's a bit of a meme, because if they're Dalaring bags, they're not taking horses, which means they're not playing Endless Horde. And if they're not playing Endless Horde on the rounds they're going first, then they're not winning. That win condition for them's gone. So you're only talking about a damage condition. And Baron doesn't help there anyway, because they're going first. Whereas if they're going second, you can choose to go, right, well, I'll trust for the horses, or I'll take the bags anyway, or do whatever. You can even just take the horses yourself and disengage, and they go, oh, well, if I Dala heal, it does fuck all. I've theory crafted with Dala a lot, and I don't like it.
Chat definitely thinks that I should have taken Wendy, and I will. I mean, this is shows a little bit of my Greyjoy inexperience. It was the first time I'd ever played Euron for a start. I think I have like 4 games with Greyjoys so far, and 100% of them I had played Wendy, and it's quite easy to appreciate what he's doing for you, right? Like, if he's always there, if you're not playing, if you're never not playing with him, it's easier to think I could survive without him. And this was the first list that I'd ever really built without him, because I thought that it could survive. I would agree that I'd probably go back to he is almost auto include. Baron also feels auto include depending on the list setup that you have, but almost every list setup that I come to feels like I auto include Baron, because there is a unit which is too valuable, too weak. Men, Reavers with Victorian, all these things, and they need to be protected. But anyway, they're the changes that I would make to that list. The other list, I'd probably just scrap and build more specifically into the meta. Though, interestingly, I think that if you're looking for a general purpose list, pretty strong.
Yeah, it's an 8 activation, general, decent. It has good units in it, right? It has Victorian Reavers, which is good. It has Baelor Sunsmen, which is good. It has Flayed Men, which are good. And it has Bowmen, which are shit according to stats, but pretty good. And then the 3 or 2 of the best NCUs in the game in Baelish and Windermere, probably. So yeah,
didn't win my first tournament outing with Greyjoys, so we'll have to continue down that path. I think there's improvements to be made.
I would have been so angry. I'm so glad I held you to a minor in the last game, because if you'd have won that last game with a standard or a crushing, you would have won the event. And more importantly, you'd have done it with a bye. Oh my god. Sketchy as shit. But yeah, no.
Win's a win.
Win's a win. Especially if you didn't even have to play a game to get it. I entered the wrong free vote lists, if anyone was wondering. I know Brian said at the start of the episode today, Mickey used a mammoth, he wants to know all about it. And the simple answer is, I got on the train on Saturday morning.
12 hours after list lock deadline.
Yeah, definitely 12 hours after list lock. Because in my nubile head, when I'd got home, I was like, oh, I'll change my lists. And then I didn't, and so I thought, oh, I've changed them in the morning, and then I was running around like a headless chicken before I left. Sat down on the train and went, shit, they're locked. And so I entered the same lists, which are, you'll notice, UK-only releases. So these are the lists that I had originally made a long, long time ago for UK-only tournaments. And the game has changed since a lot of those have gone by, so yeah. I had to play them. I think mammoths are... They're not shit. They're not shit. Mammoths aren't bad. They aren't that good. They have to be used as a battering ram.
So
of
Weasel,
sorts.
by the way, this is the real excuse, not the one, not the one that he was tired. Just in case you were counting up the not things that aren't excuses but are excuses.
Who said it was an excuse? I'm just saying that was a thing that happened. I'm just reading the facts. You can say it's an excuse if you want. Yeah, this list, I don't like the Mammoth. I think it has to be a tank, and unlike the Champions of the Stag with the 2+, 5+, 2+ you can kind of rely on. I think a 3+ you cannot rely on. Now I know that in my game it was Carlo, like he was able to get into the flank with Bowman, played like shit. Shouldn't just activate the Mammoth and moved out. But at the end of the day, he got into a position and he killed it. And I did roll. I failed a hell of a lot of 3-ups and 4-ups, but I still had a bad position. It was still my mistake. It's still my failings, which is why it died. But I got attacked in the front by John Hunters, and it killed the Mammoth. And I was like, huh, that feels pretty bad. So
I mean, Hilo says that it was good into the Hunters 3+ save.
It ironically, it really was against Hilo. And that's the problem. A 3+ save, unlike a 2+, which I feel is less dice dependent, the 3+ I do feel is a bit more dice dependent, right? It's going back to that 33% chance you were talking about before. And Hilo also didn't use a vulnerable token on him, which he could have done, which may have been able to push through more damage. So there was that there. So yeah, I do think that Ilo maybe missed an opportunity to kill Earth, but I think it was like super sketch. I don't know if it was a good thing or not. But yeah, no, I don't like Mammoths. I think for 2 less points, I'd rather take a Chariot, because the best moment on my game against Tom was when he was like, right, so how far does the Mammoth move? And I said 6. Right, so he can move 6 and then like charge another 7. And I'm like, no, he doesn't have a cav move. And Tom's face just kind of like, what? And it just like relieved so much pressure from him. And if that was a Chariot for 2 less points, I'd have been like, yes, right, I'm going to move here, I'm going to do this, I'm going to charge you in the flank, I'm going to burst your unit, and I win the game. And I saved 2 points. You know. But yeah, other times it tanked like a boss. Or, ironically, against on a Targaryen game, it chased down some Outriders. Mammoth just chased some Outriders down, and that was fun. That's all it did all game. So yeah. Yeah, free folk, innit? Mounts. It's not exactly hard. So yeah. Cool. Congratulations to Tom for winning the event. Obviously Carlo as well for winning our game and coming second. But I am glad to say that I am now one of only 2 people in the entire UK circuit who has beaten Tom in a tournament game of A Song of Ice and Fire. So there we go. He's got 2 players with wins against him and 1 player with a draw. So 1 player who's never lost to him, which is not quite the same. So yeah. Also, exclusive I wanted to. Club. What? Exclusive, yeah.
An exclusive club.
He literally said, super exclusive. I want to give a shout out to Chris, obviously, with his Night's Watch doing pretty well. But also Dan from our club, who had a pretty atrocious day 1. He started off with a good win, and then he got absolutely spanked by Jacob's Free Folk and against James Kira there from Dead Meta. But then he came out into day 2, and he smashed everyone. Basically, he went out with trying to beat everybody, and he beat all his players, and he managed to secure by the end of it a solid 5th place, which is actually really good for Dan. You know, Dan was really happy with that, and that is actually a really good result. Only pulling down 2 losses, and especially, you know, beating some decent players on the way there as well. So, yeah.
I also had an absolutely amazing game against Jacob, which went to a draw and win on points on table, where I did Euron Endless Horde. Yes. And bring on my own unit of raiders. The meme was in full effect. and yeah, it was incredibly close. It did actually. There was some discussion. Chris was watching the game. I did miss the opportunity for a more convincing win, but it came down to me making a 4-up charge in the way that I did it in the end. I had to make a 4-up charge to engage a unit to steal the token off it, to then, in Dance with Dragons, Dance with Dragons, take the token by stint. If I made the charge, I 100% was stealing it because of more ranks, but I had to steal it or I'd lose that game. It was super, super, super close and a really, really good game. And it's a bit of a shame that that one wasn't recorded because it would have been. It was a very interesting game.
Was it table 3?
Mm-hmm.
Or 4?
Yeah,
Yeah.
table 3.
Ah, sadness. All right, yeah. So I had played Jacobians Here We Stand, and I drew Endless Horde, and he didn't, and that was the game. Great. That was recorded, and it is the most hilarious moment in the world, watching 2 raid leader units with no supporting units trying to bash each other while both on like 1 and 2 ranks and basically getting nowhere. We did a hell of a lot of attacks where it's like, oh, that's 2 wounds, and then it's a morale check on a 4. Oh look, you passed. Yeah, free folk mirrors are stupid. I hate them. So tell them your starting hand in our game. Oh yeah, my starting hand against Hilo was quite literally probably the best hand I could probably draw, which was Long Plan, Endless Horde, and There's Too Many. Which are probably arguably the 3 best cards in the deck, outside of maybe Wildling. And then I drew one off the top of the deck with Craster, and guess what it was? Wildling Diplomacy. So, you can't really complain when those are your top 4 cards, can you? Yes. All
no
right,
bad cards in the free folk deck.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna lie, that was good. But you know, swings and roundabouts, right? You make your own luck. Is that what I'm told? You make your own luck? No. All right. So that was Wall on the Wall. Is there anything else of note that happened? Not really. Oh no, there was something of note. Tim Whitney, painter extraordinaire. You'd be surprised to hear won the painting competition with his awesome Starks. It is actually very interesting, Carlo. Do you not think that we had 3 entries for best painted, and 2 of them are Stark armies?
Mm-hmm.
Do you think Starks are some of the best models to paint, or make them look good anyway?
No, not at all. Both of those armies are heavily converted because
they're crap.
Because the Stark models actually aren't very good.
Yeah.
And it takes incredible painters and incredibly skilled modelers to make them look as good as they do.
Yeah.
In my opinion. And that's newer stuff. It's good. You know, obviously, like I think that the newer car Starks look good. Can't speak for the new starter set because it doesn't exist in the UK yet. I've never seen those models particularly. I don't know if anybody particularly has them. Yeah, like I think that that's not at all true. I think that Starks just you're looking for correlation where there is none there. There's just 2 players who happen to be running those armies.
I was simply making a memey point that they are terrible models, and the fact that they make them look amazing is a skill in itself. Never mind the painting it. You know, they could probably put them on the board unpainted, and they'd still look better than painted stuff from other people, because they are shit base models. If you haven't seen them, one of my favorite units that Tim's ever done is his Outriders. Outriders are fucking awful models. Tim's are lovely. And he's just completed Cranham and Trackers, who are now one of my favourite units in Stark. And they're really nice. I really love the blue he's got on them. Anyway, we will quickly show you this, because this was the block of granite that Tom got as a prize for the tournament. And it pretty much was a solid block of. Was it granite or marble or
marble?
Marble.
Yeah, that's a very heavy piece of marble. Surprisingly heavy.
All bottom weighted. So like you go to pick it up and you're like, oh, this is heavy, and then like it's horrifically bottom weighted. So if you turn to look at it, you're like, oh shit. No, it's a really nice trophy. And I did actually say to Tom when he was packing up and everything, what he actually needs to do is he needs to just etch on, or like even in Sharpie, #3. But then he was like, yeah, but then that would give validation for Carlo for winning the first two. So he's right to not do that.
I actually didn't put the number on because, maybe Tom will bring it back next year. No, there's no expectation.
You didn't tell him. You didn't tell him that. Just, oh, by the way, can you bring it back? You only get it for a year. It's like the World Cup. All right then. So that was Wall for the Wall, which was I enjoyed it. It was a good event, I think, personally, and everyone seemed to enjoy it, which is good. And the best part is it was a 2-day event, and everybody came back for day 2, which is always a positive thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We almost had 20 at the start of day 2 with one late arrival, but only 5 minutes. Yeah, I think that I asked really openly to the players for responses, and particularly the people who came from further afield, their response was very positive. They were all very pleased that it was a 2-day event. They mostly say that they wouldn't really have attended if it wasn't a 2-day event. So I'm glad about that. I will be looking to put on another event at some point in the future. There's some discussion around, like 6 months away or a year away. The calendar's really quite busy, particularly for 2 days. Can't be too close to any of the GTs, the LGT, the Scottish GT, Welsh GT, which we hope that all 3 of them will continue to run strong and be spaced out around the UK annual calendar. Really hoping that particularly next year that they will be organised in respect to each other as best as possible. Plus, I know that there's the Ribble Rumble coming up in Manchester, quite a different event, but still another 2-day event, which would really capture a lot of the same kind of people. So trying to find time in the calendar is not easy, but hopefully next time it'll have a much longer announcement period, and we could look to go bigger than, we could definitely fit 26 or 28 into the 2 rooms that we used at our gaming club. Any more than that, and it's really talking about booking out the hall below, which is very different. But look out for War for the Wall 4, or as we joked, possibly War for the Wall 5, because there's conflicting opinions on whether or not it really was War for the Wall 3. But that's what it got called in the end, so that's what we'll stick with.
Who'd have thought that Carlo would get basic numbering wrong? It's and we trust him with a stats website.
Let's say that it was Scott.
Oh, right. So there's your excuse, is it, Carlo? Just palm it off to somebody else? Oh, dear. Right, then. So we'll move on to the next things we're going to talk about, which is still tournament related. So we've got 3 tournaments that we're going to cover. We've got the Break the Meta TTS event first, you see here, which ended up with 64 players, 32 players at the end. They did actually have 33 signed up, but they did a 32 cutoff, so it was nice brackets. And this round 1 has only just started, I believe. They've only just got into it. Some games have been played, most haven't. But we are going to look at the breakdown here for the stats, and it is not far off what we're seeing in terms of relatively high free folk, relatively high Night's Watch, a slight resurgence in the Baratheon, a bit more Baratheon we have been seeing lately, but also Lannister's resurgence here, with people wanting to try maybe the Kevin builds that people think might be quite good, even though Lannisters suck. So yeah. Certainly an interesting breakdown.
They might as well give Kevin and Marbrand. People got a real hard on for Marbrand. Hardened is hardened. It's definitely a good ability. We'll see. I really like to see somebody come up with a really good Marbrand build, but I'm not so sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no. Hopefully they get something coming for Lannisters, because something that works them in a build wise, because I do feel when I've looked at list building for them and it just feels bad. Everything just feels just not what quite you want. I don't know how you felt, Carlo. I look at the build and think, yeah, it's okay, but then I'm like, but it's not good enough. It's the salt in my mouth after every build I make.
I had like a really like Heroes 3 came out, and I was literally like made some Kevin lists, made some Adam lists, and I played them, and like I didn't hate them, but I really had no interest in building Lannister lists right now. Like, I personally think that they've really just gutted the faction. Like, it can only lean into panic, in my opinion, and it's so unreliable. It does it in a really a really hit and miss way. You effectively have to combo into that, like creating heals, creating snowballs, creating these things. And I don't like to pin my hopes, he says, after having played a Euron list entirely designed around Discord. I don't like to pin my hopes on winning the game around my opponent failing an important panic check at a certain time. So I'm just not interested in Lannisters as a faction, despite the fact that they were the faction that I played for so many years, and was a Lannister diehard.
Mm-hmm.
I think they've done the faction dirty.
Probably, yeah. I think it's always difficult. It is always difficult, and I can understand from a non-competitive angle. People really don't like playing into control aspects of games, and as a result, if they feel control is too strong, they think it needs to be changed and nerfed. Even if it isn't, it's the same problem we've talked about previously with Mel. Like, this affects, we wouldn't really consider it a negative play experience, but people have a negative play experience with these things. People's feelings get affected. And as a result, it becomes this public opinion of this needs changing, even if it isn't good, like we've discussed before. And yeah, I think Lannister's got really done over by that. Red Cloaks being one of the main offenders, which we know about, which I'm fairly sure they literally changed a rule because people didn't like the way Red Cloaks interacted with it. So, yeah, it just seems a bit unfair. They did get done. Oh well, sadness.
Yeah, Belisarius, I would like them to come back to being a control faction, myself, or have their control elements brought up to power level. Like, I mean, maybe saying like if control is powerful, then they'll nerf it, but that's not true because Mance is the epitome of control, right?
Right, no, yeah, 100%. And
Mance has all the tools that Lannisters should have, right? Like,
yeah.
wildling diplomacy is effectively what Lannisters would die for. And it's why I had an interest in Kevin, because Kevin is a good control commander. He does everything that like Tywin feels like he should have been doing. So even things like what's one where start a turn where you
Predictable
maneuvers, another very distinctly control based piece. Particularly when used well, right? Like, these are cards which are high skill cards where you understand what your opponent is about to try and achieve. Its value is way more than somebody who is just guessing at what's about to happen next. So, and that is, to me, like the essence of control, which is it's at its best when you understand your opponent and you understand their strategy and you counter it. Even, like, obviously Tyrion has counter strategy, but these are all elements that Lannisters would like to have in a package that is actually competitive, but they don't. Their only competitive things are panic, in inverted commas. If you even think that they're competitive, I don't particularly think that they are, because I don't think that panic is reliable. Not in the way that they implement it. I think that Baratheons implement panic better in a much more reliable sense, and I'm way more on board with that. It is interesting, actually. Now that we state it, Tyrion is still quintessentially a control commander, but I just don't think that he does enough.
Yeah, the actual problem with Tyrion is that Tyrion, well, it's the problem with Lannisters, right? Kevin and Marbrand are just perfect examples with it, and Charles kind of said it a little bit in chat. Is that when everything in the faction is poor, your commander alone can't carry it. Like,
Yeah.
you need something else for the faction to be playable and like at least decent. It can't just be a good commander. It has to be a good commander with some good units. It has to be a good commander with some good NCU choices. I do actually think the Lancer NCUs aren't that bad, but they're not great. And so you end up with this weird situation where it's like,
I disagree. I'd say that High Sparrow is the only good. Like High Sparrow is their only NCU.
Pycelle.
I think he's okay.
I think Pycelle's
I think he's okay. I'd take Baelish before I took Pycelle.
Yeah.
So then we're effectively saying here's neutrals, right? Like yes, Baelish sits in like as nearly everybody's third NCU, right? Like he's nearly everybody's third.
Yeah.
But his neutrals, and of their own natural NCUs, personally, I rate one of them above. Right, nearly every other faction I can rate 2 NCUs that they natively have, which I think are better than Baelish. And then Baelish becomes the third in a lot of cases, and I don't always take Baelish in every single faction. I bring Pycelle as the third choice, but that's
I'll bow to your wisdom on that one. I think Pycelle's very good personally.
I don't have any any Lannister wisdom anymore. You know, once upon a time, I really would have just said nobody's beating me with Lannisters. No, nobody. At the end of 1.6, you remember the Lannister faction masters, and I fucking pasted the entire field as far as I'm concerned. Like there was not a close game at all. And then they changed the faction, and I just wasn't. I lost so much interest in it that I don't even try and look at it and think, how could I be good with this faction now? I'm just like, it's not interesting.
Yeah, that's fair. You're an outcast until you find another one, right?
Yeah, I wander the wastes looking for a faction which I like.
That's fair. All right then. So that was the entries there for Break the Meta. Now we've got the entries here for the North American Invitational. Now the North American Invitational is what is now becoming, I guess, in a lot of cases, I think a more typical faction split with a very heavy Night's Watch and Free Folk entry numbers, and Baratheons being kind of like the third faction, with Targaryens, which were popular for a while. Mother of Dragons, I think, was a big driver of that. Targaryens have slowly dwindled in play level, but they are still maintaining, generally speaking, a decent Targaryen rate. But they're dropping here, and it's Greyjoys and Lannisters again. Starks and neutrals barely making an appearance over in NA. But this is especially weird. Night's Watch in NA have always been popular. Free Folk have not. Free Folk are a quintessentially non-NA faction, or at least historically have been a non-NA faction. I know that some players
normally be in the single percentage digits, right?
Yeah, like 1 or 2, 3 entries maybe.
As popular as that.
Yeah. They are, to be fair, being picked up by players, who are known for playing other factions. So we see, for example, to be fair, Imitation Lobster does actually play Free Folk a lot, but we've got Bob, who picked them up for this event. Weasel entered an event. There you go. He doesn't do that anymore, or not nearly as often as he used to. Bogler does play Night's Watch. Free Folk a lot. And Bran the bodybuilder, who I have no idea who Brannon. Oh no, I do know. I think I do know that. If it's Rocket City, probably know who Brannon is. But yeah, so we are getting a couple like people who either don't enter events normally or who maybe not play Free Folk. But it's not, it's not like a huge resurgence, but it is big for NA. But yeah, that's obviously only into its first round. Again, I wouldn't read much into the win rates and things like that. Yeah, I think Starks. The time of the Stark play rate being absolutely fucking massively high at the start of the patch, I think is now over, right? I think people still playing Starks, but I don't think people are saying Starks are great anymore and Starks could be good. I think people go, they're fine, move on with it.
Yeah, I think that Starks are the one thing which I was personally most wrong about. I really did think that they were going to. I thought that the Starks One Sword improvements would really have an impact.
I
I
think it did.
thought that.
I think it did, but not the impact it had. Not as big as we thought, right? So
Yeah, I mean, and their card improvements are very minor, whereas the Brathian card improvements are absolute overhauls,
yeah,
right?
they're
Like they are.
redesigns, aren't they? Complete
Yeah,
redesigns.
the Brathians got a pair of absolutely top tier cards. Um, the Stark ones, very clear buffs, right? Like I think the card stayed almost not quite, but almost identical.
Yeah, it's very similar.
Lost the self-inflicting wounds. So it went from a card which was actually not good to play. Like a lot of the time, if you weren't on your last rank, it was bad to play this card. It had negative impact on you. It's now moved into being a passable on attack card, right? Like not particularly a great one, particularly at full ranks. But the faction has some power pieces. It has Caitlyn, who is super powerful. Maybe Tully Cavaliers aren't quite what people were scared that Lance Cavalry were going to be. I mean, again, that's the thing. Like people were very convinced that Lance Cavalry change was now going to be a real big difference. That the game was going to be wildly changed by that. And Tully Cavaliers not dominating, Knights of Castle Rock not dominating. And so, yeah, Starks do feel like a bit like they were a bit of a flash in the pan.
I do think the cavalry style lists, Tally Cavaliers obviously have a lot of threat, but the problem the meta has, which I don't think people have realized, the meta has actually evolved to encompass that. And it just so happens that there's other things in the meta that you have to counter that Tully Cavaliers and those cavalry type things do actually get impacted by. And as a result, it's kind of like you're not going out there being like, how do I counter Stark Cavaliers? But actually, it ends up being, oh, I have this thing in my list anyway, and it happens to beat that. I do think, I do think that personally, we talked about it actually over the weekend. In the UK, there are few, to some extent, very few, maybe none, outside of Psycho Stee, who actually play Starks at a competitive high-end level. I know people have tried them online, the likes of Tom Tyler and Jacob, who are good players, but no one's maining Starks at high level outside of Stee, really. And as a result, I do think the list building has become stagnant with them. I am very much of the opinion that there is a 9 activation Stark list there that can start to pose problems for some of the main contenders of counters, especially with the release of the Little Bear. Losing units is no longer a big deal as long as you're trading them out and using the abilities that you can. But I don't, there hasn't been a flagship Stark player who's come out really, certainly online, and said, I'm going to run, WOP. He's playing Lannisters online. Might not be winning a lot, but he's playing Lannisters online. He's making builds. He's trying to run with them. Tom randomly decides to do it with neutrals sometimes, and it works. Still don't know it. Brathians have had various different people. Free Folk has various different people. Targaryens, Night's Watch have all had various different people, like so Bob or whoever. Stark haven't got anyone that is trying to flagship them and do something interesting with them. That either means A, you can't do anything interesting with them and the people who would can't be bothered, or B, it's just people can't be bothered. People aren't interested in Starks. They want to play the other factions because they're more interesting. and that's sad if that's the case.
Yeah, I mean, it could be a hangover way back when Starks were the dominant force in the game. You know, could drove anybody who just like loved Starks for being Starks away from the faction. I think that Night's Watch have a much more dedicated fan base in that way. And so there are still people who main Night's Watch despite the previous hang up of the Othell domination. You know, like people are more willing to look past it, and people are more willing to just say, "Well, look, I just play Night's Watch because I play Night's Watch," despite the fact that it's years since Starks were the dominant force. I think that maybe people moved away from the faction a long time ago. If they were just there for the faction alone, because there are some, you know, there are definite people who do not want to play, do not even want to be associated. They don't even forget that, like, it's never a faction that's completely overpowered, and it's never even necessarily just a commander that's completely overpowered. It's specific combinations of builds, right, that nearly always lead to the problems. It's when you refine it down into like a really specific thing that is incredibly hard for almost everybody else to beat.
Yeah.
So it's not like these players are just playing an auto win faction or an auto win button, but they don't even want to be associated with the faction anymore. There are definitely players who, no matter the fact that they're not playing those commanders, they're not playing those lists, they're not utilizing those strategies, they don't want to be associated with the power that, like, power gamers play that faction because it's the best on top.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, there's plenty of players who I can understand why they don't want to do that as well.
Mikel says that Baratheons are spreading like a plague, but Baratheons have always, since the day they were released, one of the most popular factions. There is no bandwagon. I mean, there might be some people, but there is no bandwagon involved in the play rate of Baratheons. Baratheons, when they were the bottom tier faction, the worst thing going in the whole game, were still one of the most played, most popular factions.
I do feel they dropped off a little bit in mid 2021, maybe last year. I think the Baratheon resurgence came back at 2021 and went, yeah, the new patch is out, let's everyone play Baratheons. And then it wasn't quite good enough, and they all went, oh, they haven't fixed the problems, it's still shit. You know, but they are coming back. If there is a resurgence, it's the same players who were playing them last year and the year before coming back, playing them again. It isn't new players picking up Barras, or people who've never played Barras before being like, you know what, I'm going to play that really interesting faction. So yeah, cool. On to the last event, which we can talk about, which is the Stats Invitational Qualifier. This is entering its penultimate rounds. We've got the semi-finals this week, and certainly, probably something that both myself and Carlo will be doing straight after Tourney Ground is jumping into the Game 1 channel on the NRG Stats Discord to watch Podwis versus Winter is Coming, which started a little while ago. I can't see the full game, but Tom doesn't look like he's lost that many wounds in round 2, and Mel's already activated. That's probably not too bad. So we'll see how that all turns out there. Myself versus Jacob, we're going to play after he has completed his exams this week. He's got exams this week for his university, so we're probably playing at the weekend in a free folk mirror. So that will be fun. And yeah, we'll see who ends up going to the final and who ends up playing for the place, right?
I mean, whether Tom wins today or not, it's been a super impressive run. He entered with neutrals, and I thought, good on him. And then he won his first match, and I thought, that's not unsurprising. He won his second, and I thought, okay, we're getting real here. And now he's all the way into the semis, and we'll see if he can keep going. I still can't believe he's going to win, but I would love to be proved wrong.
Yeah, I mean, I'd be impressed if he beats the Meljack and Casino, but it is a casino. There is, like, it is exactly basically the definition of if the dice go his way, he might just win. Because Meljacken might do 0 all game. But vice versa, like the odds are that it won't do nothing. The odds are he will lose units. He'll fail some tests, especially with neutrals. So yeah, it's.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be. It will be quite a dicey game if it's Mel into neutrals, and as far as I can, from the little thumbnail that I saw, there is 2 units of flayed men going on there. That's going to be. This game's going to come down to panic fails, and I think that the Stannis side Baratheons can do it way more reliably right now. So my money is on that reliability. Doesn't mean that Tom can't pull it out in a one time thing. It's different though if he pulls it out in a one-time game 5 times in a row, right?
Yeah.
That's reliability. That's a tournament win, and that's an impressive feat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. So yeah, we'll see how that pans out. And yeah, probably watch it afterwards. But hey, so
jump in there after watching us.
Everyone immediately leaves and just goes and watches that instead. Viewer count drops to 0. Sad face. Right. So those are the events I wanted to cover. Stats for that event. I mean, this is a bit different. It's a bit harder to justify this because it is a knockout event, so the win rates and everything are a little bit skewed. But yeah, I mean, it was Baratheons. There you go, Mikel. Baratheons on a 24% entry rate. Not a surprise at all. If anything here, it's the Night's Watch lower entry rate that matters and is more of a surprise, I think. But people clearly thinking.
And both of there was 2 Night's Watch entries, and they both got knocked out in the first round. Interesting.
Yeah, was it first round or second?
I think Night's Watch had a 0% win rate for the tournament.
No, they won 1 game. Because I played Trash Panda in round 2, and I got a bye in round 2, so he must have won his first game.
Cool.
But yeah,
not quite then.
But basically, yeah, close to it, close enough to it. Yeah. Yeah, cool. We'll see how that all pans out in the end, I guess. With a spot up for grabs. Carlo, of the 3 players in the event who can win a spot, so that's Tom, Podwis, or Jacob. Who do you want to win it?
I want Tom to win because he's playing neutrals.
Okay, that's fine. That's absolutely fine. No, not a problem there. Who do you think will? Different question.
I think Podwis will win because I think that he'll win this match, whereas there's a 50-50 on the other side of the bracket. And I think I don't know how I feel about the Stannis versus Mance matchup. The Mance either has to bubble his entire army and can't really go anywhere, otherwise anything that ever leaves 6 inches of Mance will just get instantly burnt alive, pretty much. So I think that the final will be very interesting no matter what it is. Unless I think it's neutrals versus free folk, in which case I can't possibly imagine that neutrals beat free folk.
I guess we'll find out.
Just can't.
We may get to find out.
Such small mind, I can't possibly envisage it.
It's fair, very fair. All right then, cool. Now we've got an entry here that technically didn't know he's entered, but I saw a picture that he posted up online, and I really do hope it's his. For everyone's favourite section of the day, this entry here for some that is the mountain with Castle Rock. I think they're Castle Rock Cavaliers. I think. So like
they're Knights of Castle Rock, but
yeah.
They've had their helmets. They had their helmets changed.
Yeah. Only one picture, and if he's watching this back, or if he's watching now, he'll be like, "Oh, that's my thing." Hopefully, but yeah, this entry here, this is nuts.
Yeah, I've seen these a number of times. The color is enough to make the models
Amazing.
really high standard. The freehand on top is then just exceptional. The freehand is a whole nother level. I hope to see them at the LGT.
And he's gonna get.
I hope that he runs attachment Clegane at the LGT, because models come first.
They do. They really do. And I mean, I can give a shit how good or bad his list was. If you put that down on the field opposite me, I would take a moment to be like, fair. Absolutely fair.
I'm with Weasel. It is an absolutely nuts 0 out of 10.
Mm-hmm. That's like a 0.00 out of 10. That
is like absolute bonkers.
Yeah. No, well done, Chris. Chris Baker for that. Chris F&M online. Absolutely fantastic painter. Honestly, it's people.
I like that the sheer amount of work into the Knights and onto Clegane himself wasn't enough. He needed a tree to also kind of really just make the base pop.
There are times like this where you're like, oh, this inspires me to go painting and like do something nice. I painted a Lannister Guardsman I was particularly happy with on a base and was like, oh, that's cool. I've done that really well. And then I look back at this and I'm like, no, I'm still bad. I'm still really not this good. And Paul says it well in chat.
Paul Spurgeon's got the right idea. This is actually something over 0.
Yeah.
So basically infinity.
Limit tends to infinity. Yeah. Wow. Absolutely amazing.
I'd really like, if Chris listens back, I would like him to post in Discord Clegane from the other angle, so you can see more of his cloak. You can see more of the freehand on that cloak.
Yeah. 100%. Awesome work. So, that does not quite conclude what I wanted to talk about. Right, there it is. The other thing that we wanted to talk about, or I wanted to talk about, or we said we'd mention, is there's been a lot of chat on certainly the Stats Discord about Mother of Dragons. Daenerys Targaryen, Mother of Dragons, and about how she, I don't know, props the faction up or something like that, or maybe she doesn't, maybe she wins games where she loses games. I think Carlo's going to say this relatively succinctly.
Am I?
Yeah.
If you want her rating to change, you'll have to submit data.
Yes, there we go.
There we go.
Classic stats problem, right?
It is weird. The very few single results that she has are as good as ever.
Yeah.
Right? But like, it's such a tiny amount of results. She maintains still like a 60-75% win rate, which is as good as she was in the 2021 patch before she got nerfed. But her play rate has fallen right back. And very interestingly, she already had an incredibly low play rate because she was a pariah. Like back then, she was a pariah. Like I never understood it. Like I never understand why people make people pariahs for playing top tier stuff. She had this reputation which was way more than her actual effect, in my opinion. Possibly because dragons were really unfun for people of a certain skill level to play into. And so even before she got nerfed, she only had a 2% play rate. She was only 13% of the faction. She was not popular as a Targaryen choice. And now she's almost non-existent. She was played 4 times in April. There is some discussion about maybe some results aren't being counted in that roundup. She's her ELO will remain high as long as she maintains not losing games. Losing games requires her to play games as a start, and some people do play her, and she barely ever loses. Interestingly, she's lost 4 of the last 5, so she is falling slowly. And Drogo is rising. Drogo is getting closer and closer and closer to her. He is now the 3rd rated commander, and he is almost definitely intertwined with what the reality. If we look at Drogo himself will presumably account for like 60-something% of
75.
75% of the recent Targaryen picks are Drogo, right? So when you talk about Targs, you are effectively talking about Drogo. There is no Targs without Drogo at the moment.
That is actually that is depressingly. Like, don't get me wrong, I know Mance is good, but Mance has a 40% pick rate. Drogo has 75. That's just nuts to me that Drogo has such a stupidly high pick rate internal faction.
So she's not doing anything to the Targaryen rankings. If you want, just ignore her. Pretend that she's not there when you consider the power levels of things. She's not, because to all intensive purposes, she's not there. I never expect to meet her in a tournament. I never expect to see her down the local club. So, I mean, I'm just don't worry about it. The numbers are there so that you can make your own choices, and you can see quite clearly what her pick rate is, which is almost non-existent. It's 0.4% of all games that get submitted. You'd have to play 200 games before you ran into Mother of Dragons. If Mother of Dragons is being played in your local area, then I don't know. Let us know if you think that she's still good.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I'm just still sat here being like 75% win rates, just 75% pick rate is just. It's just.
But only a 40%, but only a 48% win rate.
Yeah, like the win rate's not that good.
Thing, like perception and reality are not always the same, right?
It's just it's you know what it is? It's actually frustrating. It's frustrating that there's a faction that's got a commander with such a absolutely ludicrous pick rate, but then isn't actually that good. Like, that's actually what's frustrating, is that people feel driven that they have to take this one thing. But it's not even.
That, but, people maybe just feel driven that he is enjoyable.
Maybe might just be
that he's not the thing that's winning is possibly good. It'd be worse. Yeah. I think it's worse with Mance. Like, I think Mance is more of a problem at 40% because I believe that people are driven to believe that Mance is the only thing that they can pick. Whereas Drogo shows that he's not necessarily, like, there's this perception that people think he's powerful. There's perception that people like his cards because he's aggressive. And he really fits the faction in general. Yeah. So that he doesn't get, like, that he doesn't win tournaments is probably for the best, right? Like, you don't want the most popular thing to also be the most dominant thing, because then you only ever see the same thing.
Yeah. No, definitely. I agree that like Mance having a higher win rate and higher faction pack rate. I still think that there you shouldn't have one commander pick 75% of the time in a faction. I just don't think that's a good, healthy statistic. Like, it means that the other commanders are just not seen as either interesting or playable. And that's a bad thing.
Well, I think their non-playability is because they're not cavalry commanders, and the deck and the unit selection all favor a cavalry commander.
Right, but then why isn't Jorah picked at all?
Because Jorah solo is the best thing inside the Targaryens.
Yeah. So it is a power level question, though, isn't it? Basically, it still comes back down to a power level thing. Whereas it feels better to run Drogo.
Why don't we go and have a look at Jayor's pick rate in 2021?
Yep. JO Commander or NCU.
JO Commander.
It'd be horrifically low, I imagine, because him as a he's nowhere near the top. Where is he? He's right down here nowadays. Hang on. 54. It'll be probably quite low because, as you say, the NCU 4%, 5% inside faction. Yeah. Yeah.
He's as low now as, he got played 92 times for a year.
Yeah.
Right? Because his NCU was dominant. And this is exactly the same thing, which is Jorah. Goddamn Mormonts all with the same name. Jorah is more popular.
Yeah.
But his solo appears in so many lists that his commander doesn't offer enough to make you move away from Drogo if what you want to play is cavalry.
Yeah.
So if what you want to play is cavalry, you only have one choice of commander in reality.
I do think the Jaw thing is a bit more twisted though, because obviously you had Othell back then, which was like ridiculous pick rate inside Night's Watch, right? Not because it had nothing to do with Jaw necessarily, but Othell as a commander was just nuts. So, whereas I don't actually think Drogo as a commander is that strong. You see what I'm saying? He just might be the only option, as you say.
Anyway, so anyway, Mother of Dragons, she will maintain her rating up until the point where you
play games.
This comes back to this thing which I say quite a bit, right? Like, and I'm not trying to be inflammatory with it. I'm not trying to piss people off, right? The stats don't care about your feelings. Like, they don't care what you think. All the stats can do is interpret the results you give it. It doesn't make any opinions about stuff. All it says is, I have this result, I'll turn it into a rating. And if you don't give it any results, it can't form a new opinion. I understand why people particularly, don't want to use MOD because they think that she's overrated, right? Like, there is a negative to that. I understand that, and that also might stop people from submitting results with her. That is intended, by the way, not particularly that you don't submit with MOD because she's overrated. You're just not supposed to want to submit and play with the commanders who are the best in the game. Mm-hmm. Right? That is intended. That is on purpose. People just ignore that fact when what they want to play is something overpowered. And as soon as it's not overpowered, they become obsessed with the fact that this thing's got a high rating and that they'll lose points. Right? It's a very interesting psychology thing. But that effect was always in play in the past, but people ignored it. And now it's overwhelmingly that they don't want to play it because of that. That's the response that you get when I say, well, just play her and her stats will change. Also, people clearly just not interested in it, even though I think personally she is way more interesting. Obviously, Craig's protest continues to this day. The energy and work that he puts into it is obviously actually surprising. Like, some days even I can't be bothered to read the post anymore. It's been going on for that long, so I applaud him for keeping it up. Thing is that there are a lot of interesting Mother of Dragons and dragon builds that you can build now. She has become a more interesting commander. She is definitely not as strong as she was, but that doesn't mean she's not more interesting, and that there aren't way more kind of creative builds that you can make with her that don't field all three dragons. It does feel like to me, I've said it multiple times, but that they should have taken away her 2 VP costing because when she dies, because that almost exclusively is always linked to cost reduction in unit. Joffrey gives up 2 VPs because what he gives you is a Kingsguard unit, which should cost more points. And it gives it to you for 6. Mother of Dragons gives up 2 VPs because she used to give you 3 points of cost reduction in her dragon army. Now she doesn't, but she kept that 2-point hangover. I think that's partly a problem.
Mm-hmm.
Paul Aiden asks about a decaying parameter. Yeah, I mean, I thought about implementing it at one point in the past. It didn't. It would be difficult to get right. It's not a no, but if people just played it, then it wouldn't be necessary.
I can imagine it's a horrible piece of code for you to write.
Well, it's not the code. I mean, it's
and the maths. I mean,
the maths would be entirely untested. Like the damage it could do to the system is way more than the improvement it would make to the system, right? And it would all be. This is the thing. It would all be to make the system conform more to what you think it should say, right? But the system just says what it says, and you should learn to interpret that for its strengths and its flaws. Its flaws are when something is very, very unused. In this case, this is a very high-profile single case of something is very, very high rated, but now nobody wants to play it anymore. Mm-hmm. It's also very similar to, this whole discussion, of course, was had about Othell. Othell was the number 1 rated thing in the game. Othell got highly nerfed, right? And not everybody, a vocal minority were outraged that I didn't reset every commander in the game's rankings because Othell had been nerfed. And they were telling me that the whole thing was now pointless because Othell was still number 1 rated, even though he wasn't winning. Well, he's not anymore. He's number 6. People have basically forgotten about him because he's not the number 1 rated Night's Watch commander anymore. And he's falling, and all it took was 48 games across the whole season since season 1. And he's showing that he only has a 40% win rate now, and he is falling down the rankings. He's not the 6th best commander in the game, in my opinion. He's not the 2nd best Night's Watch commander. He is trending towards the place that he wants to be. If people submitted with him more, he would get there faster. But everybody was outraged, or a vocal minority were outraged that he could maintain number 1 status after being nerfed. And it's exactly the same. Like, people's focus is now just on MOD because MOD has remained there.
Yep.
But all the submissions currently indicate that there's no reason why MOD shouldn't be there because she maintains one of the highest win rates in the entire game. She may not get fielded almost at all, but she is still winning 60 to 75% of all her games. So the stats say she's one of the best things there are. You may not agree, but the stats don't care.
I like how, we always know that neutral's play rate is not good. So usually, Vargo, you could almost argue that Vargo doesn't have enough data to analyze. Almost, you could actually argue that. But yeah, I mean, Darius even worse. Jesus. These are bad commanders, right? These are bad commanders. They are playing games, they're losing games, and they're just consistently losing. It is crazy to think, Carlo, we've finally done it. Tywin is no longer the worst commander in the game because neutrals are just still fucking awful.
I mean, that's rough, isn't it? Neutrals have 4 commanders, and they currently make up 4 of the bottom 5. That's yeah, and Ramsey. it is wow. Rams has brought the spam, but And Belarus says people are prioritizing their ELO and shying away from Othell and MOD. I'll not lie to you. That, for me, is great news. That is exactly what the system wants you to do. The system wants you to not want to play the best stuff.
Yeah.
The system fails every time somebody enters double mance into a tournament, because that's a person saying, I know this is the best thing I can field. I know that this will basically impede my ranking, and I will not earn anywhere near as many points as I could otherwise. I will bring it anyway. And no matter how good my opponent is, no matter what they've brought, they could have brought a really low-rated thing. They could be a really low-rated player. I'm going to ignore all of that, and I'm just going to try and stomp them with the best thing in the game.
Yeah.
Right? So that is why the system is built the way it is. If people understood it more and cared more about their ELO, then you would see a much more varied tournament entry. You would see people fielding mid-level commanders way more often just because they think that they're cool or they think that they have a great combo. And I think that that would be for the benefit. It could, I could make it more penalizing, but I don't think that that's the problem. The problem is that people don't care enough about their ELO. If they cared more, then they would use lower rated stuff more. And that would create a healthier competitive environment in my eyes.
Definitely is a problem, though, as Tom says, a little bit. If you're going to win the tournament, why not run the best things? If that's the goal is to win the event, which people put a lot of onus on, including people here, then why not try and win the best things that give you the best chance of doing so? That always comes back to it, unfortunately. Which I do agree. For events, that's always going to be an issue. But that is again why you shouldn't just record. Everyone here knows, right? You shouldn't just record event games. You should try and record casual games as well. Those casual games that you record will mean you're bringing double mance to things like a casual Friday night game. Is that really what you want to be doing to the system? Because that's not, as Carlo points out, that's not really the same kind of thing at all. But yeah, people should be incentivized. And yeah, Tom's also right a little bit. The stats points is just a measuring stick to watch out for somebody. Yeah. But yeah, Jesse also points out there's no real incentive to care about your ELO. There will be one day, Jesse.
I mean, what can I give you, Jesse? Like, do you know what I mean? Like, I give you, I give you what I can, which is, we talk about the people doing well. Speaking of which, we should probably mention Mikel in a minute. But I think that it gives you what I can give you, which is it gives you community recognition. I think there are definitely people out there who do care about their ELO. I think that there are people who care about other people's ELO, right? That they put a lot of stock into the quality of other players based on that number. I care about my ELO, I do in a roundabout sense, right? Like I care about it's interesting because I understand ELO in its broadest sense. I don't care about my rating at any given 1 point. I care that it's going up in general, because I know that in general the system will continue to go up, and I want to be towards the top of it. I want to, but I'm willing to take a dip and a loss and play things that I'm unfamiliar with, because I know that ELO changes are very temporary. If you play regularly, then the personal ELO can swing wildly. And effectively, like, you could lose and gain 100 points in a matter of a week, right? So if what that did was losing 4 games on the bounce and then winning 5 or 6 games on the bounce, after you learnt a new list, learnt a new commander, learnt a new faction, if at the end of that you're a better player, then I think that that's way, way more important than just every single game you go into it thinking, I must protect my ELO, right? Like, so I strive for a high ELO as a representation that I'm performing well at the moment, but I never consider myself trying to protect it. I never think I must play a high-rated commander because if I lose this game, I will lose ELO and that's the end of the world. I see it as over a period of like the next 10 games, if I play low-rated stuff and I pick up like 7 out of 10 wins, then that's better than if I just played top-rated stuff and picked up 8 wins or even 9 wins, because that's actually how the system works. And overall, those 7 wins will do better for me if I'm picking really, really low-rated stuff. So that's what I look to do. And more importantly, the low-rated stuff, hopefully, are things that I'm learning and improving with, challenging myself and playing harder and closer games, winning less of those games in tougher situations are more and more opportunities to learn.
Mm-hmm. It's also an important factor though that you've got to be playing people of if you're very high or vice versa very low rated. Very low rated, there's actually a lot less risk. If you're very highly rated, even picking one of the worst commanders in the game, playing into somebody who is below average, in the nicest possible sense, it's not really worth your time if you're going to pick the best stuff in the game. Like, it actually just isn't worth your time if you're the better player by some margin and you're picking the best stuff. The game for your ELO is almost worthless. So you're not even protecting your ELO really. You're not even gaining. You might as well play something less good to at least get something from the game if you're looking at ELO. And it makes the game fairer. Like, that's the whole point. And plus, if you do randomly lose one of those games, you will lose so many points that you will probably never gain them back by playing that one player with your best stuff over the long run. So play weaker stuff. It's beneficial, but also look for players. Encourage people to report all their games, because then you get a much better feel for where you're all at. And if you're playing in a closed group, so I know Howard said this earlier, he can't get his group to report games in the first place. If your group only plays other players in the group, Howard, majority of the time, that's actually the best time to record games. Because what that is a closed circuit. Your ELO doesn't leave those players. Let's say it's 5 players. You trade games, you give each other ELO backwards and forwards, backwards and forwards, backwards and forwards. In all those experimental lists, all of that ELO stays in those 5 players. It's just distributed differently. The beauty of that being is that when you then go elsewhere, players who probably are rated in your group lower than they maybe should be, then go to tournaments and beat people who are rated better than them. They gain ELO, so at the end of it's one of the things that me and Carlo actually look at the end of an event has, for us, Durham Wargames group gained ELO over the weekend. Because if me and Carlo know that Durham Wargames Group has gained ELO over the weekend, first of all, that is a brilliant result for our club. Our club has outperformed where it should have done. And second of all, there's more points for us in our closed loop. Hey! And so the people we play most with, there's more points to grab. So you're actually way more beneficial. Like, honestly, me and Carlo more extent because he simply owns more stuff physically. We will run way more like experimental lists on a Friday night, testing with people that we usually play against, than we potentially would in an event, or to some extent online as well. Simply because there's nothing to lose really. It doesn't really matter if you lose a game to someone you play every week. Not important. So yeah, it's a thing. It's certainly in closed groups. If you're the group, definitely beneficial.
Paul's got a few questions. So
yeah.
Firstly, would adding a confidence interval to the rating for the commanders, very specifically, he says, help understanding of the commander ratings? So to answer that specific question, the answer is categorically no. And by that I mean if we were doing a full statistical analysis, if I was trying to prove to you analytically whether or not one thing was better than the other, absolutely, I would determine its confidence interval. I would be able to tell you what percentage chance is that this has happened by chance versus what percentage this is definitely a real effect which we've observed, all these things. Is that going to help people understand? No, not at all, because they already don't even understand what I show them. So I don't think that a confidence interval is going to help anybody other than the people who already are very high level mathematicians, right? Most people don't know what a confidence interval is, or it would just be another thing that I would endlessly have to explain how and what it means. Whereas I think that it's a lot of work for not a lot of improved in understanding. He then followed up with, should there be a difference between casual and between competition games and experimental casual games? I have always maintained right from the very start of the creation of the site, and actually much to years ago, like how long has the site been going now? Is it 2.5 years?
It's about
Way
three.
back
It's about
to
three.
the initial release of the site and the initial growth of the site,
Yeah.
there was huge pushback to the idea that I claim that all games are equal. That you do not have to play in a tournament for it to be a worthwhile game. If I play Mickey at the club, why is that game less important than when I play him on literally the top table of the tournament weekend after? They are the same game. We might play totally different lists. We might play totally different commanders, but those things can be measured and are already accounted for. If we choose to play less competitive commanders, less competitive factions, and play much more experimental things, then they are accounted for in the calculation anyway. But the difference in the game, you may believe that you have a mindset difference, and I will actually, I believe that I have a mindset difference, which is that I believe that I play better in tournaments than I do on a casual weeknight. But making the system exclusive to tournaments, I believe, is incredibly elitist, and I believe that it's incredibly exclusionary, and creates like a barrier that doesn't need to be there. To follow on to that, Juarez, whether or not you can submit results, and you can. It's you can submit any result, not in a tournament, just using that send a challenge button. So you just challenge another player, and it becomes a full result. It's no different than if you played in a tournament.
Sent Carlo a challenge there for random game mode. He's 100% going to decline it because I'm sad. But yeah, so you can just send a challenge out. It's literally that easy, and then you'll go through. You can accept it. We can show people that if people want to. But it's it's really not hard. And yeah, it's the elitist side, we want to avoid. And there isn't really a difference between a game. Okay, there are rules differences. There are things like interpretive differences, which we could discuss at length, in terms of how people play. But the general core concepts of the game don't change between anybody playing. No one's saying a maneuver is where you pick the unit up and put it wherever you want on the board, and that's what I get to do each round. And it's like, yeah, no one does that.
Mm-hmm.
So as a result, like every game of A Song of Ice and Fire is effectively equal. There is no, as he said, no difference between top table of the biggest convention in the world, the LGT, for example, right? There is no difference between the top table of the LGT and two people playing on their kitchen table as their third game of A Song of Ice and Fire they've ever played. There is no difference. There are differences in terms of how people play. There's differences in skill levels. There's other differences outside of the game itself to do with the players and to do with the the quality of the list building, the metas and things like that. But the game is still a relevant piece of information. And actually, anyone who says it's not is just perpetuating this idea somehow that their games are more important than anyone else's, which is actually a big thing that myself and Carlo have had a massive bone to pick with players and with people in the community before, where people put a lot of onus and pressure on a particular thing and say, but he did this or he did that. And it's like, yeah, but he doesn't do that all the time. And so it's just a one-off. It's just a flash in the pan. Yes, praise him for the moment, but like, just because someone does well with that one thing that one time doesn't mean they can replicate it against other good players.
Yeah, Jesse. I mean, like there is the stipulation as long as people are actually playing the right rules, or the right cards, or something like that. That is also one of the requirements. That is one of the reasons why I have the flat out requirement that people must submit their lists and they must use the stats builder, because at the very least, it hopefully means that people are aware of what the current rules are, or aware of what the current like unit abilities are. If you get them wrong on the day, if you don't check a card or a change, but like you can't miss that a unit has changed its pricing, for example. And to Paul, history lesson, a long time ago, the worst decision I ever made was to allow people to submit like they submitted unranked results, right? I allowed them to submit results, but not basically claim that they were casual, and it created a lot of problems. It really does. For a start, the overwhelming majority of people will just default to that. It becomes this. It creates this expectation that there is, if it's not going to be the norm, shall we say, the norm becomes that it's an unranked result. And then people are like really serious about any kind of result where a player says that they want to play rated instead, right? Also, this is an ancient version of the site where on the left is we have players had two different rankings at the same time. One was their table rating, and the other one was their TTS rating. This was only done because there was huge pushback when I first started trying to create a TTS tournament. When I tried to run the world's very first TTS tournament for the game, people said that they would not enter unless I created a new ranking structure for TTS only play, because TTS was such a wildly different game. And I felt that was very sad. I was very, very pleased the day which I made sweeping changes to the site and got rid of all of those things. Casual games were no longer allowed to be submitted. TTS and tabletop rankings were merged into one. You now just have a player ranking. I personally believe that the top 8, the top 10, the top 100, they represent players that play on TTS. People that play on some of them play only exclusively on TTS. A very few of them. Some of them, a larger amount, only play in person. The vast majority of these people play in both. And it makes for a much healthier ranking structure. It makes for a much healthier discussion about the site in general. It makes for a much healthier interaction with the ranking structure when people are no longer thinking that somebody's a tryhard if they want to play a ranked game, because every game will provide information about what your ranking is. You don't need to be protective of it. You don't need to be exclusive about it. You also, I know it can be hard for some people, but you also need to not get upset about it if it's not as high as you want it to be. I could only say, just accept that the players above you are better. I want to be number one. I need to accept that I am currently not number one. And I just take that as a fact. You know, I know other people don't believe in the ranking structure as much as me, but I take for a fact that the people above me are playing better than I am right now. And so if I want to be the best player, I don't point at it and say, this is why it's wrong, this is whatever. I just say, those people are better. I should play against them. I should practice against them. I should learn from them, learn how to beat them. And I think that going back to the discussion about the non-tournament games versus tournament games, a huge amount of the interaction, particularly on TTS, between the top players. And for the active TTS players, there is a lot of interaction. Mikel will play top 10 players continuously. That interaction could not happen at a tournament. The amount that Mikel plays other high-level players would be 1 or 2 at best rounds of a big event happening every few months. And instead, Mikel can play and submit and gain and lose ranking points 5 days of the week against other top 10 players. And so it's very, very important. It's a very much more computer game mindset than tabletop mindset, right? Like, if you try to tell somebody who played League of Legends or something like that, right, that only ranking done in some kind of major event would count, then they would say, well, how am I supposed to get a good ranking in the first place if I don't want to attend these tournaments? They would say that's a payment barrier or an exclusivity barrier between me being able to ever get good. So I think that it is alien to some people who aren't like competitive computer game players, but to those who do play competitive computer games, it's just normal.
Yeah. Yep. I have nothing to add.
Craig asks, what can I learn from you, Mickey?
What can you learn from me?
12 ELO's worth is what I can learn, clearly. Now, what I can learn from Mickey is that my anti-free folk list in Greyjoys can be better.
I was actually surprised. I saw it play on Friday night. I knew he had this kind of like anti-list. I know we spoke about it earlier. I played into it with a list that self-professed. Anyone who just checks my online games will know that that's not the list I would like to play anymore. And I didn't actually feel like the list was that oppressive to beat. I won't say it was a nice game. It wasn't a nice game for me. Carlo did outplay me. I made some mistakes that he punished really hard. He did beat me fair and square by being a better player on the day. But he beat me by being a better player, not by his list being a teched list to beat mine. At least that's how it felt. So, I would never say though that Carlo's worse than me. This is just because I play more games than Carlo and I have the more opportunity to go up than Carlo at the moment. That's all.
And I mean, I believe that I'm on the uptick of a downslide, which is I've been struggling with Greyjoys. I've been struggling to find the right lists, the right stuff. I put a lot of faith in Victorian attachment to begin with, and I'm starting to move away from him. I don't like him as much as I used to. I favor paying 1 more point to have a full 12 wound unit on the board instead. I think that without boldness and courage, Relentless is questionably worth 3 points and is pretty much not the best thing that you can buy in a faction that has great 4-point unit options. So I consider myself in the middle of a learning period. I think and I hope that when I come out the other side of the learning period, that I will be able to say I'm once again better than Mickey. I will hope that I can put myself. Interestingly, this whole discussion we were going to say, Mikel has been on an absolute tear recently. I mean, is he on like a 20-game win streak? There was 1 draw. We could add them up, though. He hasn't lost in a long time.
15-game win streak.
15-game win streak. There we go. Recent performance has absolutely driven him from being in amongst the top 10 to being the standout number 1 player in the world right now. And you can say your ranking system means nothing, but to me, he is standout, the best performing player. He is playing on TTS continuously against anybody who will play him. He is playing a mid-rated faction. He is not bringing the best possible list out there. He's bringing the best list he can for his own faction, bringing the best list he can for a given commander. That's just a given, right? And we're going to have to come back to that, Jesse, because you are flat out wrong. And please stop repeating that statement. He is on an absolute tear, and he's doing it with something mediocre. It's different than if he were playing with the number 1 rated thing. He would be nowhere near 50, 60 points above number 2, more than 100 points higher than number 3. You'll notice if you go 100 points down from 3, you've got probably the next 50 players.
It's 14.
Mikel isn't. It's not impressive that Mikel is number 1. It's impressive that Mikel. It's not even impressive that Mikel has broken 2,000. It's impressive that he is so far ahead of the rest of the pack right now, because that is showing that he is performing incredibly well. So, and interestingly, he plays Greyjoys, so there is a ton for me to learn from Mikel. So that's where the interest is for me right now. Having a look at what Mikel is doing. To come back to Jesse's point, Jesse, just for anybody who doesn't see the statement, Jesse says, people that play all the time will always be at the top. That, I without going into a whole load of graphs and maths and stuff like that, it is factually not true. That is a lie. Not even just a misinterpretation. If you look players who play high amounts, they are generally higher rated, and that is because they are more experienced and they are generally better players. Playing more, I have to be very, very clear about this, and I want to be very, very clear about this, because it is the fundamental backbone of what ELO is. Playing more is of no advantage in an ELO system. There is a minimum bar, an amount that you must submit to prove that you are more than average, right? Winning one game can only bring you at most 40 points above your starting average position.
Mm-hmm.
If you won 20 games in a row from nothing, you could be the world's number 1 rated player. If you beat the top 10 players repeatedly in crushing wins for 20 wins in a row, you could get to 2,000 relatively easily.
If it was
and not only would you have gotten there, you would have brought the top 10 players all down by about 100 points in the process.
Yeah.
If you think that playing 20 games ever is an unreasonable barrier to proving that somebody's top 10, then there's nothing we can do, because any less than that, and we can't really make any judgments as to whether or not it was one random occurrence or whether or not a person is reliably and repeatedly good.
Mm-hmm. I do think that there is a point, which is aside from actual ranking, but your ranking has more chance to change if you play more games. And if people, and there is an argument that says if you have a very high win rate, what you can see is someone climb and split apart from the pack, if you will. If there's a pack of people, you can see someone climb, because that is their win rate with the positives. But then what you would expect, because you have no idea where on the curve you're seeing that, right? But then what you're actually saying is their skill hasn't gone up. I'm predicting that their skill hasn't gone up. So within the next 5 games, I'm expecting them to lose and come back down again. That's actually the thing, is that if you expect, if their win rate, if their ELO is going up, it means their win rate is going up. They're almost directly correlated, not quite, but almost definitely. Therefore, if you've seen them on the upward curve, it might just be that you've missed the down curve, they haven't hit the downs just yet, or they're just a better player and their ELO deserves to be higher. You can get a 20, 30 point difference with other players in roughly the same skill area. So things are like Podwis or even myself and to some extent Carlo breaking away from people outside the top 10. That's possible to do with just where on the performance curve you happen to be after the last couple of games. To be 100 points up of people requires your curve to be just better than everyone else's. So, like, a 50-point break, manageable, but the only he's not played Podwis, and he's not even got he's got a 50-point break from Podwis, and Podwis is 50 points above that. So I mean, 100-point break's just not possible unless he's better than people. So, you know.
Basically, yeah. And not just better than the average player. Yeah. We're talking better than the rest of the top 10.
If it was 20 points, then the argument of he plays more games and so his fluctuations are more often, I wouldn't say that it's true. It's nothing to do with the amount of games he's played. But you could argue that he's on a fluctuation of a high run at the moment, and then he's going to have a low run and he'll drip back down. But that doesn't happen that often. So yeah. Tom Tyler
the winter result, and it's caused a change in the top 10. Yep. Yeah, I mean, and you'll see right there, right? You've got a good player playing a really low-rated faction, and beating number 2 in the world, and he's just dropped 40 points, right? That is what is always on the line. If you could earn 40 points 10 times over by beating players like Podwis with neutrals, right? And you'd catapult yourself to number 1 in about 15 games, right? But do you really think that you're good enough to beat top 10 in the world with neutrals 15 times in a row? If not, then you're going to have to play more games to prove that you're good. Like, I don't really know what people's expectations are, right? Like, do they expect to win one tournament with 4 games and then say, well, I should be world number 1 right now? Well, no, because other people, I mean, you know, look at this top 10. They've all won tournaments. They've practically all won repeated tournaments, back-to-back tournaments. Yeah, winning tournaments is not a measure of well, I'm a top 10 player in the world, because there are 10 tournaments a week. There are 10 players a week who win a tournament. So what we need to look at the quality of opponents, the quality of, I mean, you can look at Masara, you can look at the amount of events that he wins. According to the ranking system, he's a good player, but not a great player, because winning repeated tournaments of very small size does not show anything significant.
I'm trying to see where the lowest rated tournament winner is, actually, because it's just nothing to point them out as a player, but I'm actually just curious.
And Jesse, you know, you say 20 games is like 4 months worth of games, right? I mean, it is for me too, right? I generally play 2-ish games a week, right? But I don't always get to play those 2-ish games every week. So, you know, we're on roughly that kind of time scale. Are you saying that you should be able to prove you're the world number 1 in less than 4 months? I find that odd, because, you know, also presumably that includes not going to tournaments, unless what you're saying is that you're going to go to 3 tournaments or 4 tournaments over 4 months, and winning those 4 tournaments will make you the world number 1. I think I get frustrated by this whole discussion, because I think that people don't give, I mean, forget the ranking structure in general, right? And that it's, you know, forget the idea and concept. Just try and imagine that I'm a person talking about the site rather than the person who created the site. People don't give credit to the people who have high ratings. Well, they don't appreciate the amount of wins and the high quality play that they make, because people always assign skill to their own success and look to other people's success. That is like just a known phenomena. So I think that it's never going, if you always just point at the high rated players and say they're high rated because, and the next thing out of your mouth isn't they're a great player, then you'll never trust or believe in a ranking structure of any kind.
Fair. That's pretty damning. But also fair, you know. I found him, by the way. I found our lowest rated tournament winner.
Okay.
Just out of curiosity, because I was curious. He's in at 1,711th position, called Sium Maru, and I'm guessing he is Indonesian or Polish? Just Polish, right, that one?
Is he Polish? He must be Polish. There's an event every week in Poland.
He's Polish. Yeah, that is Polish. That's right. I don't know why I was saying Indonesian. And he has a ranking of 1423. So he is technically, for what the ranking would suggest, at 1500, he is a below average player. And that's not a comment on his skill. It's just what the ranking would suggest.
That is literally a comment on skill. But
that is what the site would project, that he is a below average player. And he still won an event, which says everything. You can still win events. Winning events is not the same thing as being amazing. Although, congratulations for him for winning an event, because that was probably quite hard, quite a good event, I hope, for him. I really hope he enjoyed it. So, yeah, there we go.
I can't believe, well, that's it. Tom's playing you or Jacob in the final of the TTS Invitational, so that'll be exciting.
Yeah.
We'll find out next week which one it is.
Yeah. It'll be super interesting. In fact, very, very interesting indeed. I guess we'll find out how that all pans out. Yeah, we'll see. So the people taking the slot now, right now, Podwis is out. It's either going to be Jacob or Tom taking it. Interesting. After I beat Jacob, I better think about how I beat neutrals now. Neutrals are easy. It's fine. Dear. Right. Should we call it there?
Absolutely. I mean, that's been a classic Carlo rant about all the things that are wrong with the world.
Oh, that was a piece of news we forgot. Oh yeah, Mikel, you will drop fast. Trust me. I've been watching your ELO going, juicy.
Yeah, I've been really trying to find a time to play Mikel. I think he was at 1990 or something like that. 19. I really hope first of all, I hope that he gets the 2022. I really like him to get 7 more ranking points. Ever since he got to post 2000, I just feel like every time I look at it that it's a year, rather than a ranking. Also, when he was just under 2K, I actually really wanted to play him myself. I wanted to either stop him or be the person to let him get it, but I missed that opportunity. So now I just have to try and be the person who drags him back down under 1900 if me and him can find a time for a game.
That's the gauntlet being thrown down. Yeah, wow. I just look at people at the top going, juicy, juicy, juicy. ELO. But yeah, cool. So the events happening this week then. Tomorrow, there's an event happening in Podvale in Wrocław, Poland. Where would we be without a Polish event happening? Not even at a weekend anymore. Literally just at random times of the day on random days of the week. So yeah, I hope that event in Poland goes really well tomorrow. The Italian National Championship is happening this weekend. It's fully signed up for. Everyone's attending. Hopefully it will go ahead, and hopefully it will be great. So we'll see.
I mean, supposedly we might have our first Worlds 2023 qualifier off the back of that.
Yep.
We will also definitely 100%. I mean, going back to what I can do for you, I can't make you famous or make you a millionaire, but I can give you an invitational spot. So hopefully, I can tell you the Italian national winner may or may not be earning a world spot. That I can't give, but I can give an invite to the LGT Invitational. So we'll find out there what that is and who will be added to the exclusive 16-player tournament that will be happening at the LGT. Hopefully, they'll be able to make it over. And on the Invitational in general, we are at about 12 spots have been given out of the 16. I will be doing an update and checking in on all those players, making sure they can all still make it, and also be looking at maybe a few more European players and their previous results. Hopefully, send out some invites. So don't forget that if you have particular tournament results, particularly big events run on the site that are coming up or that have been run, and you would like to extend an invitation to the winner, you are the winner and you would like to be invited to the invitational, then do reach out to me, and final spots will go soon because we don't want to be inviting people just a couple of weeks before the event, of course, to try and make any kind of travel plans.
Yep. Cool. So that's the Italian National Championship. Do check up on that. I'm going to definitely be looking at what the split down is for factions, find out a little bit more about the Italian region in terms of factions. We have another event happening on Saturday. This is in Lublin, Poland. Best of luck there. We've got an event happening in Northampton this weekend. That's happening at Kingdom Gaming. Really hope that event goes well. Just a one-dayer. I hope that really goes well, actually. We've got the Sunday Slaughter National qualifier happening this weekend as well, which I'll no doubt be following along and seeing as well. So lots of Song Lesson Fire that actually leads to something. With the Italian Nationals, you're going to have an Italian champion for the first time properly. You're going to have someone going to the LGT. Sunday Slaughter is going to have national qualifiers. Lots of kind of impactful results happening there. There's also happening a Song of Ice and Fire tournament in Ontario, Canada, in Mississauga. We've got another one in Sacramento at Honey Badger Games happening over the weekend as well, which is fantastic. And another event happening in Sandy in Utah, US, in Salt Lake. That's awesome. 30 point. Love it. Keep going. There's an event happening in Ostrek. That's next weekend, though. We won't go on to that. So, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.5 if we count the Russian one there, or the Polish one, sorry. 7.5 events happening this week. It's good. Lots of events. We seem to be consistently hitting that 7 event across the world mark now, pretty much week in, week out. So that's great to see. Any final words, Carlo?
I am really looking forward, genuinely, really, really looking forward to Italian nationals, and because it's not just Italians playing, it is some Italians went over to Spain recently, and now the Spanish, French, they're heading over in a small number over to Italian nationals. I think that's a really interesting mix, particularly because the Italians don't play on TTS much. And so it's very, very interesting to find out where their standing is versus some of the names that we see playing more regularly. Is Mikel going? No, Mikel. But a lot of regular Spanish names. Teja, we've seen before.
Realized they've revealed the lists.
Oh, wow.
I've just realized
what's the faction entries?
Oof.
A lot of Barras.
That's Starks, Targaryens, Night's Watch, Barras. And then Greyjoy,
basically 4 factions.
Wow.
Cool.
Wow.
Yeah, I'll be following along over next weekend to that and Sunday Slaughter, which I still just think is the premier active club out of the US. I know they probably get plenty enough recognition, accolades these days. But I think that'll be a real melting pot of good talent and a qualifier to watch. That the people coming out of that will be real contenders to win US Nationals. It'll be a real testing ground for what might happen later on at Gen Con.
A quick reminder, there is the Pontypool GT happening in July. Just a quick shout out for them. I know that Scabman was on the other week, but just another shout out to their event. Really hope that goes well. And also a shout out to the Leeds group who managed to get it's gone up to a 30-player event in Leeds, which is going to look amazing, hopefully, at the start of June. Only 3 rounds for 32 players, it hopefully will be, which is, not necessarily what the best combination of things. But the response to that event has been amazing. And Paul, who runs the event, is a fantastic guy. I've met him a couple of times now and had the pleasure to play against him. And it's really nice to know that there's another scene happening in the UK, which will bring fresh blood into the game. So yeah, and I also wanted to give a bit of a shout out as well to what hopefully will be an emerging group in York, which is not far from us at all as well. It sounds like they might be getting some more players, hopefully invested in the game, and some stuff happening around there in the future, I hope. So thank you very much everyone for tuning in on another Monday. I'm tired. I'm probably going to not look at footage. I'm probably going to write some more assignment stuff and go to bed. Carlo's probably going to put a German national banner on the website.
Yeah, look out for the German national banner and the German national official national tournament, which was announced the other week and is up on the site. June. It's up towards the top of the tournaments. Yeah, keep an eye out for that, because that's great news that they did manage to finalize having an event end of July 30th. So yeah, let's look out for that. It'll be good stuff all around.
Yep, fantastic. And as always, guys, it's been a pleasure. I wish you all the best of luck in your games this week, except Jacob. No luck for him. Yeah, I'll see you all next week. Take it easy.
Ready, aim, release! Anyone see my mammoth?